Morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely, beautiful, and sunny Thursday morning. Great to see you. Hope you've having a good week, and thank you, as always, for joining us for our Bible reflection for today. Continuing our adventure through the remarkable book of the prophet Isaiah. And today we're in a chapter that's not very well known, but it's fantastic, and we've learned lots from it nonetheless. It's Isaiah 47. So here goes, without further ado, Isaiah chapter 47. Come down and sit in the dust, virgin daughter Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter Chaldea, for you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal, remove your veil, strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance and spare no one. Our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, is his name. Our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, is his name. Is the Holy One of Israel. Sit in silence and go into darkness, daughter Chaldea, for you shall no more be called the mistress of my kingdoms. I was angry with my people, I profaned my heritage, I gave them into your hand, you showed them no mercy. On the aged you made your yoke exceedingly heavy. You said, I shall be mistress forever, so that you did not lay these things to heart or remember their end. Now therefore hear this, you lover of pleasures, who sit securely, who say in your heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, or know the loss of children. Both these things shall come upon you, in a moment, in one day. The loss of children and widowhood shall come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the great power of your enchantments. You felt secure in your wickedness. You said, no one sees me. Your kingdom and your knowledge led you astray, and you said in your heart, I am, and there's no one besides me. But evil shall come upon you, which you cannot charm away. Disaster shall fall upon you, which you shall not be able to ward off, and ruin shall come on you suddenly, of which you know nothing. Stand fast in your enchantments and in your many sorceries, with which you've laboured from your youth. Perhaps you may be able to succeed. Perhaps you may inspire terror. You are wearied with many consultations. Let those who study the heavens stand up and save you. Those who gaze at the stars and at each new moon predict what shall befall you. See, they are like stubble. The fire consumes them. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. No coal for warming oneself is this, no fire to sit before. Such to you are those with whom you have laboured, who have trafficked with you from your youth. They all wander about in their own paths. There is no one to save you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. So the context in which Isaiah is speaking here is that the people of God, people of Israel, have been taken away into ignominious exile in Babylon. They were taken away and they were held captive by the Babylonians, otherwise known as the Chaldeans. When you hear Babylon or Chaldea, they mean the same thing, and Babylonians and Chaldeans, they're basically the same people, Nebuchadnezzar et al. And they took the people of Israel into exile, into ignominious exile, and they were there for several years. And Isaiah is speaking into that context, and he basically is saying here, the future, the fate of Babylon, the people of Israel have been out for a while, and he's in this chapter, he lays out to them the fate, what's going to come to the Babylonians. And it's interesting, the language he uses, it's a sort of female language. It reminds me a bit of people tend to talk about a ship or something, a female language, so may God bless her and all who say that. So in the same way that people would describe, say, a ship or something as being female, the same kind of language is used here. And you've got daughter Babylon, who kind of starts off as a virgin daughter, and lo and behold, what happens to her? Her nakedness gets shown. She takes the millstones and grinds mill, which I believe is the kind of the most kind of difficult bit of manual labour that females ever did in those days. So it was kind of, you had to remove the veil, strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers, your nakedness shall be uncovered, and so on. And so that's basically describing, if you like, what's coming to Babylon. You know, they've been high up, and now they're going to be brought down. And the language he uses here in verses 1 to 4 essentially describes a bit like the disgrace and the shame, that she started off as like a virgin daughter, and she starts off with the shame. And so basically things are not going to happen well for the Babylonians going forward. And it seems quite harsh, but I will take vengeance, I will spare no one, he says in verse 3. So the question we need to ask then is why? What is God's beef, if you like, with the Babylonians? What's his beef with the Chaldeans here? Why is he going to do it? Well, for several reasons. Firstly, in verse 6, when the people of Israel were taken into exile, the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, treated them far more cruelly than they needed to be. God essentially says here that the people needed to be taken away because they'd gone astray. And it says in verse 6, I was angry with my people, I profaned my heritage. I gave them into your hand, you showed them no mercy. So the people of God needed to be taken into exile because they'd gone astray and they turned to other gods and all that type of stuff. And in a sense, they had what's coming to them. What was unnecessary is that the Babylonians treated them unnecessarily cruelly. And you hear about this in, for example, Psalm 137, the way they were laughed at and so on. So the first reason why God has a beef with the Chaldeans is that while the people of Israel were taken into exile, they treated them far more cruelly than they needed to. In verse 6, you showed them no mercy and so on. So that's the first thing, is that they were not, didn't teach the people of Israel a lesson. They were far more cruel than they needed to be. Then he talks about the blasphemy which they did as well. He talks once or twice about saying, so you say that I am and there's none besides me, talking about themselves. And at the end of the day, God is I am. God is the one who is. And in a sense, they're putting themselves in God's place, and that is blasphemy. So they were unnecessarily cruel. They also took blasphemy as well. So they put themselves in God's place. And instead of giving the credit to God, they gave credit to themselves. Then in verse 8, it talks about them being lover of pleasures. Now, again, God is good, and I think the world is to be enjoyed. But there is kind of a hedonism, a kind of pleasure at all costs, who just love and pursue pleasure all the time, right or wrong, and so on. And I think, in that sense, a sign of where they've gone astray is that here is you lover of pleasures. And I think that there's implication here of a kind of a hedonism, sort of inappropriate behaviour going on here as well. In verse 9, they also committed sorcery as well. In other words, they looked to divine. So instead of looking to God for their guidance, instead they looked to sort of wizards and that sort of stuff instead, and they looked to other gods and so on instead. And instead of looking to God for their security, again, they looked to just doing spells and this sort of stuff instead. So in a sense, they committed sorcery too. They looked to other people, other things, for things they should have looked to God for. And of course, they committed the worst sin of all, which is pride. They're thinking, I'm secure, I'm all right, thanks very much. Verse 11, but no evil shall come which you cannot charm away. So they kind of thought that they were so good, they were so clever, they were so powerful that nothing bad could ever happen to them. So the context is the people of God have been taken into ignominious exile with the Babylonians. And God gives the news that the Babylonians, the Chaldeans have got it coming to them. And it sounds harsh when you first read it, but actually God outlines the reasons for it. That they've been not just cruel, but unnecessarily cruel. That they've committed blasphemy. That they put themselves in God's place, calling themselves I am, a place which is only for God. That they've become, in a sense, lover of pleasure for its own sake. That they've looked to other things and other wizards and things rather than to God, and they've become so full of pride, so full of their own self-achievement, that they think nothing could ever happen to them. That they think we're great, we're all powerful, we're all knowing, and in a sense put themselves in God's presence. It's in a sense that they've put themselves in a place where only God should be. So that's what's coming to them. And that's the story, and that's the news which God has for his people, that God is going to, he says in verse 4, I'm going to rescue our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, is the Holy One of Israel. God is going to redeem them, God's going to bless them. To which you may think, well, that all happened 2,500 years ago, didn't it? So what's it got to do with us today in Penn, wherever you may be watching this morning in 2024? Except to say that actually in lots of ways it's very relevant to today. the society we live in today. That society can be very cruel. That in a sense, people today can put themselves where that God should be. That we live in a world where people just, we live in a hedonistic society where people often do pursue pleasure for its own sake. That people often do look to spells and other things when they should be looking to God. But most of all, the pride which we see, that people think that we are so clever, that we're so powerful, that we're so intelligent, that we don't need God anymore. That is, and there's a lot of that about, and that I think is the biggest sin of all. And I have to say, I think it's rife in the world today. So I think Isaiah 47 may sound like something that happened a long time ago, and it was clearly meant for the context being 2,500 years ago. But I'd say the lesson is as relevant as it's ever been. That we need to remember that we need to, in our place, we need to put God first, do things God's way. That remember that we may be clever, but we're not on God's league. That we may think we're powerful, and there are many things that we can do. But at the end of the day, God is God, and he needs to be put in his rightful place. And I think there's a big lesson for all of us, for us as Christians, for us as a church, us as a society. I think there's a big lesson for us today. Friends, I hope you find that helpful. God bless you. Thank you for watching. And there'll be more tomorrow. Have a lovely day.